At my graduation ceremony, my brother stood up and shouted, he cheated his way through college. The entire auditorium stared. I walked to the podium, accepted my diploma, and whispered to the dean, who smiled and nodded. The auditorium fell silent. 700 people turned in their seats, following the sound back to row M where my brother Derek stood with his phone held high, recording everything. My mother's face went pale. Dad grabbed Derek's arm, but he shook it off. That's right. My brother paid someone to write his papers. He bought his grades. Derek's voice echoed off the vaulted ceiling of Harrison Hall. This whole ceremony is a joke. Dean Morrison paused mid-handshake with another graduate. The girl waiting behind me for her diploma looked mortified, unsure whether to step forward or retreat. Camera flashes popped across the crowd as parents captured this unexpected drama instead of their children's achievements. I kept walking. Each step felt measured, deliberate. My legs wanted to run, my hands wanted to shake, but I'd prepared for this moment for 3 months. Ever since I discovered what Derek had planned, I'd been ready. Dean Morrison extended my diploma with a professional smile that barely concealed her concern. The entire faculty section sat rigid, waiting to see how I'd respond. Professor Chen, who'd mentored me through my senior thesis, looked stricken. Dr. Wallace, chair of the engineering department, had his phone out, probably already calling campus security. I accepted the diploma and leaned close to Dean Morrison's ear. Check your email. The one I sent 2 hours ago marked urgent. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. She nodded once, and something in her expression shifted from alarm to curiosity. I stepped away from the podium without looking back at Derek. The next graduate stumbled forward, and the ceremony lurched ahead like a train trying to regain momentum after an emergency stop. My mother caught up with me in the lobby after the ceremony concluded. She'd been crying, mascara streaking her cheeks. Nathan, what on earth was that about? Why would Derek say those things? You should ask him. I kept my voice neutral. He's your brother. Whatever's between you two, this was inappropriate. Completely inappropriate. She dabbed at her face with a tissue someone had given her. Your father is furious. Dad appeared then, steering Derek by the shoulder. My brother wore that smug expression he'd perfected over the years, the one that said he'd gotten away with something. At 26, Derek had exactly one skill: manipulation. He'd convinced our parents he had a learning disability that made traditional education impossible for him. He'd convinced them that his failed business ventures were just bad luck. He'd convinced them I was the golden child who'd stolen all the opportunities that should have been his. Explain yourself, Dad said, looking at Derek but somehow making it sound like he was addressing both of us. Derek pulled out his phone. I have proof. Text messages between Nathan and some guy named Marcus who runs a paper mill. $500 per essay, more for research papers. He turned the screen toward our parents. Here. Read them yourself. Mom took the phone with trembling hands. She scrolled through several exchanges, her face growing more confused with each swipe. These are from your number, Nathan. Keep reading, I said quietly. She did. Her expression changed slowly, like watching weather shift from clear to stormy. These dates. Nathan, you were in high school during some of these transactions. This says junior year of college, but you would have been 17. Exactly. I met Derek's eyes. I graduated high school early and started college at 17. But those messages are dated from when I would have been a junior in college, which would make me 19. Basic math. Derek's smugness flickered. A typo. The guy probably meant. There's more, I interrupted. Notice the writing style in those messages? Yo bro, need that paper ASAP. I've never used the phrase yo bro in my life. Also, check the area code on Marcus's number. Dad took the phone. His background in law enforcement kicked in immediately. This is a 312 area code. Chicago. Nathan's been in Boston the entire time. So what? People move. People use different numbers. Derek was sweating now, tiny beads forming at his hairline. Here's what actually happened, I said, projecting my voice so several family friends who'd gathered nearby could hear. Derek created fake text messages using a spoofing app. He found some defunct paper mill website and generated conversations that never occurred. Then he planned to humiliate me at graduation, hoping the public accusation would stick even after it was proven false. That's insane. Why would I do that? Derek looked at our parents with practiced innocence. Because 3 months ago, Grandma Helen changed her will. The lobby seemed to contract. Our grandmother's estate wasn't enormous, but it was significant. More importantly, she'd been planning to split it evenly between Derek and me. Then she'd changed her mind. Mom's voice came out barely above a whisper. How do you know about the will? Grandma told me herself. She said she was leaving everything to me because Derek had asked her for money 12 times in 2 years, and every single time he lied about what he needed it for. The business investment that was actually sports betting debts. The medical emergency that was a vacation to Miami. The car repair that was a down payment on a motorcycle he crashed 3 weeks later. I watched Derek's face cycle through denial, anger, and finally recognition that I knew everything. She told me she felt like she was enabling his worst impulses. She wanted to break the pattern. Dad's grip on Derek's shoulder tightened. Is this true? Grandma was confused. She was old, her memory. She was sharper than any of us. I cut in. She had every conversation documented. Emails, text messages, bank records. She showed me everything because she wanted me to understand why she was making this choice. She felt guilty about it, but she was determined. Derek's face had gone red. So you poisoned her against me. Turned her into your personal ATM. I never asked her for a cent. You know that's true. I looked at our parents. Call her lawyer. Mr. Patterson will confirm Grandma made those decisions independently. She consulted him over 6 months before talking to me. A security guard approached our group. Folks, I need to ask you to continue this conversation outside. We have another ceremony starting in 30 minutes. We moved to the parking lot, a miserable little procession. Other graduates and their families gave us wide berth, pretending not to stare while absolutely staring. My roommate Marcus caught my eye and gave me a thumbs up. He'd been with me when I discovered Derek's plan, helped me prepare my response. Outside, beneath a gray May sky threatening rain, Derek finally dropped his innocent act. You think you're so much better than me. Always perfect, Nathan, perfect grades, perfect internships, perfect everything. I worked for what I achieved. You had every advantage handed to you. His voice rose to a shout again. Mom and Dad paid for your tutors, your prep courses, your application fees. What did I get? Lectures about applying myself and figuring it out. Mom looked stricken. Derek, we offered you the same support. You refused it. You said you wanted to be self-made. Because you made me feel like a failure for needing help. That's not fair, Dad said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. We tried to help you. After you'd already decided I was the disappointment. Derek's anger collapsed into something rawer, more painful. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered sitting in my dorm room 3 months ago, scrolling through my university's anonymous gossip forum. Someone had posted a thread titled Nathan Wright Cheating Scandal, Evidence Inside. The same fabricated text messages, along with accusations that I'd bribed professors and plagiarized my thesis. 200 comments within an hour, most of them calling for my expulsion. I'd traced the original post to a library computer. Security footage showed Derek signing in with a guest pass he'd gotten by claiming he was visiting me. He'd spent 40 minutes creating multiple fake accounts to boost the post, making it look like numerous people had evidence against me. The forum post, I said now. The one you made in February. Did you think that would work? Mom looked confused. What forum post? Campus gossip site. Someone posted fake evidence that I'd cheated on everything. It got enough traction that 2 professors actually questioned me about it. I kept my eyes on Derek. I had to sit through a preliminary academic integrity hearing. 3 hours defending my work, showing drafts and revision histories, pulling up timestamps on every assignment I'd ever submitted. I didn't. The IP address traced back to that computer in Harrison Library. The one you were sitting at on February 14th at 2:30 in the afternoon. Campus security pulled the logs. Your signature is right there in the visitor registry. Derek's mouth opened and closed. Dad's expression had shifted from confusion to cold fury. Mom just looked devastated. The hearing cleared you? She asked. Completely. But it was humiliating. Having to prove I'd earned something I'd worked 4 years to achieve. The anger I'd been suppressing bubbled up. Do you know what Professor Chen said to me afterward? She apologized. She said she was sorry for doubting me even for a second, but that the university had to take allegations seriously. I sat there nodding, saying I understood, while inside I was furious that I had to be grateful someone believed in my innocence. You should have told us, Dad said. I was going to. Then I decided to wait and see if anything else happened. I pulled out my own phone. 2 weeks after the forum post, someone filed an anonymous complaint with the dean's office claiming I'd bought my placement in the summer research program. Another week after that, someone sent emails to all 3 professors on my thesis committee suggesting they check my work extra carefully for plagiarism. Every single accusation came from untraceable accounts, but they all had the same goal: destroy my credibility. And you think I did all that? Derek's voice had lost its strength. I know you did. Because you got sloppy on the 3rd email. You copied the same typo from the forum post, calling Professor Chen Professor without the seconds. You also mentioned my thesis was on renewable energy optimization in urban infrastructure, which was accurate, but you phrased it exactly the way I'd explained it to you at Christmas dinner. Word for word. The silence stretched out. Rain began to fall, light drops that darkened the concrete around us. Finally, Derek said, "You've had everything. Just this once, I wanted to take something from you. So you tried to ruin my academic career? My reputation? My future? I shook my head. That's not wanting something I have. That's wanting me to have nothing. Mom started crying again. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. And Derek just stood there, soaked by the increasing rain, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry, okay? I was angry, and I made stupid choices, and I'm sorry. Sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught? He didn't answer. The dean's office is everything, I told our parents. Every fake post, every fraudulent email, every piece of fabricated evidence. I documented it all and sent it this morning, time to arrive 2 hours before the ceremony. That's what I told Dean Morrison to check. Why didn't you give it to them earlier? Mom asked. Because I wanted Derek to go through with his plan. I wanted him to stand up in that auditorium and make his accusation in front of 700 witnesses, thinking he'd finally won. I looked at my brother. I wanted you to feel what I felt 3 months ago. That moment when you realize everyone is looking at you, judging you, questioning everything you've worked for. Nathan, that's cruel, Mom said. Maybe. But it's honest. I turned to leave, then stopped. The university is considering filing charges. Falsifying evidence, defamation, unauthorized access to campus systems. Dean Morrison said they'd wait to see if I wanted to press the matter or handle it as a family situation. Dad's expression went from angry to alarmed. Charges? Nathan, he's your brother. This is between family. He stopped treating me like family when he tried to destroy my future. I met Derek's eyes one last time. You have until Monday to decide if you want to apologize to the dean's office yourself, or if you want to wait for the lawyers to get involved. Your choice. I walked away. Behind me, I heard Mom calling my name, but I didn't turn around. My graduation gown was soaked through, the tassel hanging limp against my mortarboard. I'd waited 4 years to walk across that stage, and Derek had tried to turn it into my worst nightmare. Instead, it had become his. Update 1, posted 3 weeks later. I didn't expect to update this, but enough people have messaged asking what happened that I figured I owed everyone closure. Derek did not take my advice. He didn't go to the dean's office on Monday, or Tuesday, or any day that week. Instead, he hired a lawyer who sent the university a letter claiming harassment and threatening a lawsuit for defamation if they pursued any charges. The lawyer argued that Derek's accusations at the graduation ceremony were protected speech, and that any attempt to punish him would violate his rights. The university's legal team responded by sending Derek's lawyer approximately 90 pages of documentation. Server logs showing the exact times and locations Derek accessed campus systems. Digital forensic analysis of the fake text messages. Testimony from 3 separate IT security specialists. Copies of every fake forum post, every fraudulent email, every fabricated piece of evidence. Derek's lawyer withdrew from the case within 48 hours. The university didn't press criminal charges, but they did issue a formal ban prohibiting Derek from setting foot on campus property. They also sent a detailed report to the State Bar Association regarding his lawyer's conduct, since the initial cease and desist letter apparently misrepresented several key facts. I don't know what came of that. My parents tried to mediate. They invited both of us to dinner at a neutral restaurant, some Italian place in the suburbs where they used to take us when we were kids. I went because I wanted to hear what Derek would say when forced to face me across a table. He brought his girlfriend, Jennifer, which should have been my first warning sign. Jennifer is nice enough, but she's completely absorbed Derek's version of reality where he's the perpetual victim of circumstance. She spent the first 15 minutes of dinner explaining how stressful it had been for Derek, dealing with all this legal pressure, and didn't we understand how much anxiety he was experiencing? I had anxiety too, I said, cutting into my chicken parmesan. When I sat through an academic integrity hearing defending work I'd legitimately completed. When I wondered if my professors would ever look at me the same way. When I considered that job offers might get pulled because companies would Google my name and find accusations of cheating. That's different, Jennifer insisted. You were eventually cleared. Derek is being persecuted by a vindictive institution that wants to protect its reputation. I set down my fork. He fabricated evidence. That's not a difference of opinion, that's documented fact. Allegedly fabricated, she corrected. No, definitely fabricated. The forensic analysis confirmed it. The metadata on those fake screenshots showed they were created on Derek's laptop, using software he downloaded specifically for making fraudulent text conversations. Mom put her hand on mine. Nathan, please. We're here to move forward, not rehash everything. How do we move forward when Derek hasn't acknowledged what he did? Dad cleared his throat. Your brother has had a difficult few years. His business ventures didn't pan out, he's struggled financially, and seeing you succeed when he's been struggling has been hard on him. That doesn't excuse his actions, but it provides context. Context isn't the same as consequences. What do you want? Derek spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. Seriously, Nathan. What do you want from me? You've already ruined my relationship with the university, probably tanked any chance I had of getting grandma's inheritance back, and now mom and dad look at me like I'm some kind of criminal. What else do you need? I need you to admit what you did. Fine. I made some posts online. I sent some emails. I got carried away because I was frustrated. He said it like he was confessing to eating the last slice of pizza, not attempting to destroy my academic career. You didn't get carried away. You planned it. You researched paper mills to make the fake messages look authentic. You created multiple accounts to make it seem like lots of people had evidence. You filed official complaints knowing the university would have to investigate them. Every step was calculated. Derek's jaw tightened. You're right. I planned it. I wanted to hurt you the way you've hurt me my entire life by being perfect at everything. I'm not perfect. I work hard. There's a difference. Easy to work hard when everything comes naturally to you. Nothing came naturally. I studied while you were out partying. I went to office hours while you were sleeping off hangovers. I rewrote my thesis 4 times because the first 3 drafts weren't good enough. My voice was rising, and I forced it back down. You act like my success just happened to me, like I won some lottery you didn't get a ticket for. I earned what I have. With mom and dad's money. They offered you the same support. You turned it down because you wanted to prove you could do it yourself, then blamed them when things got hard. Jennifer jumped in again. This is exactly the problem. You refuse to acknowledge your privilege. Some people have to work twice as hard. I'm not doing this. I stood up, pulling my wallet out. I came here hoping Derek would actually apologize, that we could find some way past this. But he's still convinced he's the victim, and you're all enabling it. Mom looked like she might cry again. Nathan, please sit down. We've barely started talking. We're not talking. We're relitigating whether Derek's actions were justified. I threw 2 20s on the table. Here's my share of the bill. I hope you all figure out whatever you need to figure out. I left. Behind me, I heard Dad calling my name, but I kept walking. My phone started buzzing with texts before I even reached my car. Mom, please come back. We need to work through this as a family. Dad, your brother made mistakes. So have you. Forgiveness goes both ways. Derek, enjoy being alone, since you're so much better than everyone else. I blocked Derek's number. I didn't respond to my parents. 2 days later, Grandma Helen called me. She was 87, sharp as ever despite what Derek claimed about her memory, and absolutely furious. Your mother called me crying, she said without preamble. She said you walked out of a family dinner and won't return their calls. She's worried sick. Did she tell you why I walked out? She said you and Derek had an argument about graduation. She said you're being unforgiving. Grandma paused. She left out some details, I suspect. I told her everything. The forum posts, the fake messages, the scene at graduation. Grandma listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. She had strong opinions about everything and rarely kept them to herself. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I changed my will because Derek asked me for money to help a friend with cancer treatments. He showed me pictures of this friend, a young woman with 2 children, and said she couldn't afford chemotherapy. He needed $15,000 to help her. It broke my heart. Grandma, I gave him the money. Then I ran into Carol Winters at the grocery store, and she mentioned seeing Derek at a casino in Atlantic City. She said he was at the high-stakes poker tables, seemed to be losing badly. I checked the dates. He'd gone to Atlantic City 3 days after I gave him the money. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for him. I called the phone number Derek gave me for his sick friend. The woman who answered had no idea what I was talking about. No cancer, no children, no connection to Derek at all. He'd found some random cancer patient's photo online and created an entire fabricated story. Her voice shook slightly. That's when I knew I couldn't leave him money. Not because I don't love him, but because I'd be funding his self-destruction. Mom and Dad don't see it that way. Your parents love both of you, and that love makes them blind to certain truths. They want to believe Derek is simply struggling, not that he's made a series of destructive choices, she sighed. But you're not blind, Nathan. You see your brother clearly, and that makes you the villain in their eyes because it's easier to blame you for being harsh than to admit Derek needs serious help. What am I supposed to do? Exactly what you're doing. Hold your boundaries. Refuse to pretend his behavior is acceptable. Her voice softened. And be prepared for them to choose him anyway, at least for a while. Parents often protect the struggling child at the expense of the successful one, because the successful child seems like they'll be fine either way. That's not fair. Very little is fair, sweetheart. But you have your degree, your future, and your integrity. Derek has excuses and resentment. I know which foundation I'd rather build on. We talked for another hour. She told me about her own brother, who'd stolen from their parents and blamed her for reporting him. She talked about the guilt she'd carried for years, wondering if she'd been too harsh, before finally accepting that protecting herself wasn't the same as attacking him. When we hung up, I felt marginally better. At least someone understood. The next day, I got an email from Professor Chen. She'd been copied on the university's report about Derek's activities and wanted to meet for coffee. We sat at a quiet cafe near campus, and she explained that she'd been dealing with something similar with her own son. He's convinced his younger sister has it easier because she's naturally good at math, Professor Chen said. He struggles with numbers, always has, but he's brilliant with words and people skills. I've tried explaining they have different strengths, but he only sees her trophies and not her hours of practice. How do you handle it? Honestly? Not well. I oscillate between defending my daughter and trying to build up my son. I worry I'm failing both of them. She stirred her coffee absently. When I saw what your brother did, I recognized the pattern. The resentment that metastasizes into sabotage. The conviction that someone else's success is a theft from your own potential. Did your son ever do something like Derek did? Not yet. But I watch him carefully, and I make sure my daughter knows I believe in her even when he's tearing her down. Professor Chen met my eyes. You did the right thing by documenting everything. Not just for yourself, but for Derek. Someone needed to make the consequences real before he escalated further. My parents don't see it that way. They might not for a long time. Maybe never. But the alternative was letting him destroy you, and that wouldn't have fixed whatever's broken in him. It would have just given him temporary satisfaction before he found another target for his resentment. We talked until the cafe closed. She recommended a therapist who specialized in family conflict. I made an appointment for the following week. My parents didn't call for 10 days. When they finally did, it was Dad, and his tone was formal, almost cold. Your mother and I have discussed the situation extensively, he said. We think it would be best if you apologize to Derek for embarrassing him at the restaurant. I embarrassed him? You made accusations in front of Jennifer. You walked out dramatically. You've refused to engage with our attempts to mediate. He sounded tired. We understand you're angry, Nathan. But Derek is genuinely struggling with his mental health right now, and your refusal to forgive him is making things worse. His mental health isn't my responsibility. He's your brother. He's also an adult who made choices. Choices that could have destroyed my academic career. And now you've destroyed his relationship with his family. Dad's voice rose. He's talking about moving across the country. He says he can't be in a place where everyone looks at him like a criminal. Then maybe he shouldn't have committed a crime. Academic misconduct allegations aren't criminal charges. No, but filing false reports and creating fraudulent documents could be. The university chose not to pursue it. They showed him mercy. I paused. I showed him mercy by giving him a chance to come clean before it all went public. He chose not to take it. Dad was quiet for a moment. Your mother is devastated. She feels like she's losing both her sons. She's not losing me. I'm right here. I'm just not willing to pretend Derek's actions were acceptable to make everyone more comfortable. So we're supposed to cut him off? Let him spiral? I didn't say that. You can have whatever relationship with him you want. But I'm not apologizing for defending myself, and I'm not reconciling with someone who hasn't shown genuine remorse. The conversation ended badly. Dad said I was being stubborn. I said he was being manipulated. We both hung up frustrated. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, my parents have maintained minimal contact. Birthday texts, nothing more. Derek apparently did move, somewhere in Colorado according to a cousin who mentioned it at a family gathering I wasn't invited to. I started my job last week at a renewable energy firm in Boston. The work is challenging and exactly what I hoped for. My colleagues are brilliant, the projects are meaningful, and nobody looks at me and wonders if I cheated my way there. Some nights, I wonder if I should have handled things differently. Been more forgiving, more understanding, more willing to meet Derek halfway. Then I remember sitting in that academic integrity hearing, having to prove I'd earned something that should never have been questioned, and the doubt fades. Professor Chen was right. Making the consequences real was the kindest thing I could have done, even if nobody sees it that way yet. Update 2, posted 4 months later. Life has a way of forcing resolution even when you're content to leave things unresolved. My grandfather passed away last month. Heart attack, sudden and unexpected. He was 79 and had been in good health, so his death shocked everyone. The funeral brought the whole family together for the first time since my graduation. Derek came back from Colorado. He looked different, thinner and older somehow, with new lines around his eyes. He didn't bring Jennifer. When I asked Mom about it later, she said they'd broken up 2 months ago after Derek admitted he'd been lying about several aspects of his life in Colorado. Apparently the great new job he'd told everyone about was actually unemployment, and the amazing apartment was a room in a house he shared with 4 other people. We didn't speak at the wake. We stood on opposite sides of the funeral home, and our parents divided their time between us like diplomats navigating hostile territories. Aunts and uncles noticed the tension but had the grace not to mention it. The funeral itself was simple. Grandpa had wanted no fuss, just family and close friends sharing memories. Derek spoke briefly about childhood fishing trips. I talked about how Grandpa had taught me to solve problems by breaking them into smaller pieces, a lesson that had served me through engineering school. Neither of us acknowledged the other's speech. After the burial, everyone gathered at Grandma Helen's house. She'd insisted on hosting despite her grief, saying John would have wanted people together rather than scattered to restaurants. The house filled with the sounds of quiet conversation and the smell of food nobody felt much like eating. I was in the kitchen helping clean up when Derek walked in. We both froze, hands full of dirty plates, trapped by the narrow space and the presence of our aunt washing dishes at the sink. "Nathan," he said finally. "Derek." Our aunt looked between us, assessed the situation with the wisdom of someone who'd raised 5 children, and announced she needed to check on something in the living room. She left us alone. "I've been wanting to talk to you," Derek said. "Now's probably not the best time." "When would be better? We've avoided each other for 4 months. We can keep doing that, or we can have an actual conversation." He set the plates down on the counter. "I vote for conversation." I put my own plates in the sink. "Fine. Say what you need to say. I'm in therapy," he said it abruptly, like ripping off a bandage. 3 times a week. It's part of the deal I made with Grandma." "What deal?" "After you told her everything, she called me. Said she'd give me one chance to change, that she'd help pay for treatment if I committed to it seriously." His hands were shaking slightly. "She said if I didn't take the offer, I was on my own. No money, no support, no family connection." "That sounds like Grandma." "She saved my life." Derek's voice cracked. "I was in bad shape in Colorado. Worse than anyone knew. The gambling had gotten out of control, I owed money to people who don't accept payment plans, and I was seriously considering ways out that I can't even think about now without feeling sick." I didn't know what to say to that. The anger I'd been carrying for months felt suddenly complicated, mixed with concern and residual resentment. "What I did to you," Derek continued, "my therapist says it was a projection of self-hatred. I felt like a failure, so I tried to make you one too. I wanted to drag you down because watching you succeed made me feel worse about myself." He met my eyes. "That doesn't excuse it. Nothing excuses it. But it's an explanation. Okay. I also need you to know that I understand what I took from you. Not your graduation, not your degree, but that feeling of being trusted. I made people doubt you, question your integrity, and that's something you can never fully get back. Even though you were cleared, there's always going to be a part of you wondering if people remember the accusations more than the truth." He was right. I'd been offered the job I wanted, but I'd still found myself explaining the graduation incident during a background check, watching the HR person's expression carefully for signs of doubt. The university had officially cleared me, but I'd never shake the knowledge that my name had been associated with cheating, however briefly. "I'm sorry," Derek said. "I'm genuinely, completely sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Sorry I did it. Sorry I hurt you. Sorry I damaged our relationship maybe permanently." He wiped at his eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to hear that." We stood there in Grandma's kitchen, surrounded by casserole dishes and plastic-wrapped desserts people had brought, and I felt the anger I'd been holding start to loosen. Not disappear, but loosen. "I appreciate you saying that," I told him. "It doesn't fix everything, but it matters. Is there anything I can do? Anything at all? Keep going to therapy. Keep working on yourself. Don't do to anyone else what you did to me." I paused. "And maybe in a year or 2, we can try having a meal together without lawyers and ultimatums." Derek laughed, a wet sound mixed with crying. "I'd like that. I miss my brother. I miss mine too." We didn't hug. We weren't there yet. But we managed to finish cleaning the kitchen side by side, which felt like something. Mom found us later, both of us sitting on Grandma's back porch watching the sunset. She looked between us cautiously, like we might be unexploded ordnance. "Everything okay?" "We're talking," I said. "That's a start." She sat down on the porch steps, and Derek moved over to make room. The 3 of us watched the sky turn orange and pink and purple, not saying much, but present together in a way we hadn't been for months. Dad joined us eventually, followed by Grandma Helen. She'd aged visibly since losing Grandpa, her shoulders more stooped, her movement slower. But when she saw Derek and me sitting near each other without hostility, she smiled. "Your grandfather would be glad to see this," she said. "He always said family was about showing up, especially when it's hard." "It's still hard," Derek admitted. "Good. The easy things aren't worth much." She settled into a chair someone brought out for her. "Hard means you're doing something real." We stayed out there until the mosquitoes drove us inside. The house had emptied somewhat, just close family remaining. Uncle Paul was telling terrible jokes in the living room, trying to lighten the grief. Aunt Marie was organizing leftovers with military precision. Cousins sprawled across furniture, exhausted from emotional overload. It felt like family. Complicated, messy, imperfect family, but family nonetheless. Derek left the next morning to drive back to Colorado. Before he went, he found me outside loading my car. I meant what I said yesterday. About being sorry, about changing. He hesitated. I know I've said things before and not followed through. I know trust takes time to rebuild. But I'm going to do better. Not for you, not for Mom and Dad, not even for Grandma. For myself. That's the right reason, I said. The therapist says I need to focus on my own path instead of comparing it to yours. Says comparison is killing my ability to appreciate what I achieve. He smiled weakly. Apparently it's a common problem, but knowing that doesn't make it easier. Nothing worth doing is easy. You sound like Grandpa. I'll take that as a compliment. We shook hands, which felt formal but appropriate. He drove away, and I watched his car disappear down the street, wondering if we'd actually managed to rebuild something or if this was just a temporary truce brought on by shared grief. Time would tell. Back in Boston, work consumed most of my energy. The renewable energy project was more complex than anticipated, requiring collaboration with city planners, environmental scientists, and community organizations. I threw myself into it, grateful for problems that had clear solutions and measurable outcomes. Professor Chen checked in periodically. She'd become an unexpected mentor, someone who understood both the technical challenges of my work and the emotional complexity of family conflict. Her own son had started therapy too, apparently, after a particularly bad incident where he'd sabotaged his sister's college application by submitting a false recommendation letter. Patterns repeat until someone breaks them, she told me over coffee one afternoon. Your brother is breaking his. My son is breaking his. The question is whether the rest of us can adjust to those changes or if we're too invested in the old dynamics. What if he doesn't actually change? What if this is temporary? Then you'll deal with that when it happens. But if you assume he can't change, you guarantee the relationship stays broken. If you allow for the possibility, you at least leave the door open. I thought about that conversation for days. The instinct to protect myself warred with the desire to believe Derek's apology was genuine. Eventually, I decided to try something radical. I'd operate as if he was telling the truth while maintaining clear boundaries. Trust but verify, essentially. Derek called every few weeks. Short conversations about nothing important. His job search, my work projects, random observations about life. He never asked about money or favors. He never made excuses for what he'd done. He simply showed up consistently, which was more than he'd done in years. 3 months after the funeral, he called with news. I got a job, he said, excitement evident in his voice. Nothing fancy, but it's stable. Tech support for a software company. Decent pay, benefits, room for advancement if I work hard. That's great, Derek. I start next week. I'm nervous but good nervous, you know? Like I'm actually building towards something instead of just surviving. We talked for 20 minutes, the longest conversation we'd had since everything imploded. When we hung up, I found myself genuinely happy for him. Not cautiously optimistic, not guardedly hopeful, but actually happy. Mom called that evening. Derek told me you two have been talking. We have. I'm glad. She sounded tearful. I've been so worried about both of you. I know we handled things badly, your father and I. We didn't know how to support you both without feeling like we were choosing sides. You were in an impossible position. That doesn't excuse how we treated you. You were defending yourself against something terrible, and we made you feel like the problem. She paused. I'm sorry, Nathan. I'm sorry we didn't believe you immediately, sorry we pushed you to forgive before Derek had earned it, sorry we made you feel alone. I appreciate that, Mom. Can we try again? Not go back to how things were, but build something new? I'd like that. We're working on it. Sunday phone calls, occasional visits, the slow reconstruction of family bonds. It's awkward sometimes, stilted other times, but it's happening. Derek and I met for lunch last week when he came to Boston for a training seminar. We ate at a small Thai place near my office and talked about everything except the past. His therapy, my projects, movies we'd seen, books we'd read. Normal brother things. At the end of the meal, he picked up the check before I could reach for it. I've got it, he said. I know it doesn't make up for anything, but I want to start paying my own way. Literally and figuratively. Thanks, Derek. Thank you for giving me another chance. I know I didn't deserve it. We walked out together, and for the first time in years, it felt easy. Not perfect, not healed, but easier than it had been. Grandma Helen calls this Tuesday progress. You're both moving forward instead of being stuck in the worst moment of your relationship, she said during our weekly call. That's all anyone can ask. She's right. The graduation incident will always be part of our history, that moment when Derek's resentment crystallized into active sabotage. But it doesn't have to be the defining moment. We get to write what comes next, and maybe that story includes reconciliation. Maybe it includes two brothers who learned hard lessons about jealousy and boundaries and the difference between explaining and excusing. Maybe it includes forgiveness, earned slowly and maintained carefully. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe Derek backslides, or I lose faith in his progress, or we discover some wounds cut too deep to fully heal. But today, right now, we're trying. And trying is more than we managed for months. That has to count for something. The truth about family is that it's messy and complicated and nobody gets it right all the time. We hurt each other, sometimes accidentally and sometimes on purpose. We project our insecurities onto the people closest to us. We compare, compete, and resent when we should celebrate. But family also means showing up after everything falls apart. It means creating space for people to change, holding them accountable while leaving room for growth. It means accepting that forgiveness is a process, not a decision, and that rebuilding trust happens slowly, one conversation at a time. Derek and I aren't fixed. Our relationship isn't restored to some idealized past that probably never existed anyway. But we're both learning that success isn't a limited resource, that his achievement doesn't diminish mine, and that we can both build meaningful lives without tearing each other down. The hardest part of revenge is knowing when to stop seeking it. The sweetest part of reconciliation is realizing you don't need revenge anymore, that you can be whole without requiring someone else's destruction. I graduated with honors, started my dream job, and maintained my integrity through circumstances designed to shatter it. Those things are mine, earned and real. Derek is building his own foundation, slowly and with more humility than he once had. That's his, and I can recognize its value without feeling threatened. We're both still works in progress. That's okay. Progress is the point. And if there's any message in this story, it's that sometimes the greatest victory isn't destroying the person who hurt you. Sometimes it's building a life good enough that their attempts to tear you down become irrelevant. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's watching them build something good too and discovering you can be genuinely happy about it. Not because you're obligated to forgive, or because family means accepting anything, but because you've done the work to separate their actions from their worth, their mistakes from their potential. That's not weakness. That's freedom. And it's the only revenge worth having. Final update, posted 1 year later. A year changes everything and nothing at the same time. Derek got promoted last month. His supervisor called him into the office on a random Tuesday morning, and he spent the entire hour convinced he was being fired. Instead, they offered him a team lead position with a substantial raise. He called me immediately after, voice shaking with disbelief. They said I've been the most reliable person on the team, he told me. That I'd take initiative and help newer employees without being asked. Me, Nathan. They were describing me. Because that's who you are now, I said simply. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then Derek said, I spent so many years thinking I was fundamentally broken. That there was some defect in me that explained why everything went wrong. Therapy helped me realize I wasn't broken, I was just making terrible choices and calling it bad luck. We talked for an hour. He described his new responsibilities, his anxiety about managing people, his determination to be the kind of leader he wished he'd had earlier in life. The conversation felt comfortable in a way that would have been unimaginable during the graduation incident. My own career had progressed steadily. The renewable energy project I'd started on had expanded beyond initial projections, and I'd been assigned to lead a team implementing similar systems in 3 other cities. The work was demanding but fulfilling, exactly the kind of challenge I'd hoped for when I first chose engineering. Professor Chen had become more than a mentor, she'd evolved into something like a friend. We met monthly for coffee, discussing everything from technical problems to family dynamics. Her son had completed his first year of college with a solid GPA and, more importantly, without sabotaging his sister's continued success. It's amazing what can happen when people decide to do the work, she said during our last meeting. Your brother, my son, they both had to hit bottom before they were willing to climb out. The question is whether we're gracious enough to acknowledge their effort or whether we stay stuck in who they used to be. I think I'm finally past being stuck, I admitted. There are still moments when something triggers a memory of that hearing, or graduation, and I feel angry all over again. But those moments are getting rarer. That's healing. Not forgetting, not excusing, but integrating the experience into who you are without letting it define you. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. You've handled this with remarkable maturity, Nathan. A lot of people would have cut Derek off permanently and been justified in doing so. I considered it. For months, I was convinced that was the only healthy option. I watched students hurry past outside, backpacks bouncing, faces focused on wherever they were rushing to. But Grandma Helen said something that stuck with me. She said that refusing to allow for the possibility of change is its own kind of prison. You end up locked into your anger, constantly rehearsing old grievances, unable to move forward. Your grandmother is a wise woman. She is. She also said that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or minimizing what happened. It means deciding you're no longer willing to carry the weight of someone else's mistakes. I paused. Derek has to carry what he did. That's his burden. But I don't have to carry it for him. The conversation stayed with me for days. I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd stopped thinking of myself as Derek's victim and started thinking of myself simply as Nathan, someone who'd experienced something difficult and chosen to respond with integrity. That shift mattered more than I'd expected. Grandma Helen's health had declined somewhat over the year. Nothing acute, just the gradual accumulation of age taking its toll. She'd started using a cane after a fall in March, and she tired more easily than before. But her mind remained sharp, and her opinions remained forceful. I want to do something while I'm still around to see it, she announced during a family dinner at her house. I've been thinking about my will, about the message I'm sending with how I distribute things. The room went quiet. Derek set down his fork carefully, face neutral but clearly anxious. I'm splitting the estate evenly between Nathan and Derek, she continued. Before anyone says anything, let me explain. When I changed the will originally, it was because Derek was in a destructive spiral and I refused to fund it. But he's done the work to change. He's proven over this past year that he's serious about building a different life. I'm proud of him. Derek's eyes filled with tears. Grandma, I didn't earn that. Nathan was right about why you made the change initially. You've earned it now. That's what matters. She looked at me. Nathan, I know this might feel unfair to you, given everything that happened. If you object, I'll reconsider. Everyone turned to look at me. Mom held her breath. Dad's hand froze halfway to his water glass. Derek stared at his plate, waiting. I don't object, I said. Derek has put in the work. He deserves to benefit from that. The relief in the room was palpable. Mom actually started crying, apologizing while reaching for tissues. Dad cleared his throat several times, fighting his own emotions. Derek looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, gratitude mixed with something deeper. After dinner, Derek and I ended up on the porch again, same spot where we'd started talking after Grandpa's funeral. You could have objected, he said. You would have been justified. Maybe. But what would that accomplish? You've changed. I've seen it consistently for a year now. You show up when you say you will, you do what you commit to, you own your mistakes instead of deflecting them. I leaned against the porch railing. Punishing you forever for who you were doesn't make sense when you're actively becoming someone different. I still think about what I did sometimes. How close I came to ruining everything for you. His voice dropped. My therapist says I need to forgive myself, but I'm not there yet. That's between you and your therapist. What's between us is whether we can have a functional relationship going forward, and I think we can. Just functional? Maybe more than functional eventually. But I'm not going to pretend the past didn't happen. There's a scar there, Derek. It's healed, but it exists. He nodded slowly. I can work with that. Scars are better than open wounds. We stayed out there until the mosquitoes drove us inside again, talking about small things, future plans, shared memories from before everything went wrong. It felt normal in a way I'd forgotten was possible. The following month, I was invited to speak at my university's graduation ceremony. The administration wanted me to address the graduating class about overcoming adversity and maintaining integrity under pressure. I almost declined, remembering how my own graduation had been marred, but Professor Chen convinced me to accept. You have a story worth sharing, she insisted. Not the details of what Derek did, but the broader message about responding to injustice with dignity and documentation rather than just anger. I spent weeks crafting the speech, trying to find the right balance between honesty and inspiration. The day of the ceremony arrived with perfect weather, sun bright but not too hot, breeze keeping the humidity manageable. Standing at the podium in Harrison Hall, I looked out at the same auditorium where Derek had stood up and shouted his accusations. 700 new faces stared back, waiting to hear whatever wisdom a graduate from just a year ago could possibly offer. A year ago, I stood where you're standing, I began. I'd worked 4 years for that moment, stayed up countless nights studying, pushed through projects that seemed impossible, and finally reached the finish line. I was ready to celebrate. I paused. Then someone I loved tried to destroy it all in front of everyone I cared about. The room had gone completely silent. Parents leaned forward. Graduates sat straighter. I'm not going to share the specific details, because that's not what matters. What matters is the choice I faced in that moment. I could respond with immediate anger, defend myself loudly, make a scene that matched the one being made against me. Or I could trust that truth and preparation would speak louder than accusations. I told them about documentation, about the importance of keeping records and building evidence when facing false allegations. I talked about the difference between revenge and justice, between tearing someone down and simply refusing to be torn down yourself. The person who tried to hurt me was struggling with their own pain, I continued. That doesn't excuse what they did, but it provides context. They looked at my success and saw their failure reflected back. They tried to solve their internal problem by creating an external crisis for me. Several faculty members nodded. Dean Morrison smiled slightly from her seat in the front row. Here's what I learned: your integrity can't be stolen, only questioned. And if you've built your success on genuine effort, those questions will collapse under scrutiny. But you have to do the work ahead of time. Keep your drafts, document your processes, maintain your standards even when it seems easier to cut corners. I wrapped up by talking about healing and growth, about how the person who'd hurt me had since done the difficult work of changing, and how I'd had to do my own difficult work of allowing for that possibility. The applause was generous. Afterward, dozens of students came up to thank me, several sharing their own stories of false accusations and professional sabotage. Parents shook my hand, saying they hoped their children would show similar grace under pressure. Derek had attended the ceremony. I'd invited him, uncertain if he'd come, but he'd driven up from Colorado specifically for it. He waited until the crowd thinned before approaching. "That was brave," he said. "Talking about what happened without making me the villain of the story. You were the villain of the story. But you're not anymore, and that's what matters. I want you to know that I've made amends where I can. I wrote apologies to Professor Chen and the other faculty members I caused trouble for. I made a donation to the university's Academic Integrity Office in your name. It's not much, but it's something. I hadn't known about any of that. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. Part of my therapy is making concrete amends, not just apologizing but taking action to repair damage where possible." He smiled slightly. "It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary." We went to lunch with our parents, all four of us together without tension for the first time in over a year. Mom and Dad had done their own work during this time, attending several therapy sessions to process how they'd handled the situation initially. They'd apologized multiple times, both to me for not believing me immediately and to Derek for enabling his destructive patterns. "We're learning too," Dad said over burgers at a restaurant near campus. "Learning that loving someone doesn't mean protecting them from consequences. Learning that supporting one child shouldn't mean sacrificing the other. Learning that parenting doesn't end at 18, Mom added. We're still figuring out how to be good parents to adult children with complicated lives." The conversation drifted to lighter topics. Derek's promotion, my projects, their upcoming anniversary trip to Maine. Normal family discussion, the kind I'd taken for granted before everything exploded. On the drive back to Boston later that afternoon, I called Grandma Helen to tell her about the speech. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Not just for the speech, but for how you've handled this entire situation. You could have stayed angry forever and been justified. Instead, you chose growth." Derek chose growth. I just chose to acknowledge it. That's harder than it sounds. Most people get comfortable in their anger, especially when it's righteous. It's easier to hold on to grievances than to reassess them based on new evidence. She coughed slightly, and I heard the weariness in her voice. "I'm glad I got to see you and Derek find your way back to each other. It's one of my great reliefs as I get older, knowing you boys will have each other after I'm gone." "Don't talk like that. You're going to be around for years." "Maybe. Maybe not. Either way, I'm at peace with how things turned out." She paused. "You know, when Derek first did what he did, I was furious with him. I thought about cutting him off entirely, washing my hands of him. Your grandfather talked me out of it." "He did?" "He said that Derek was at a crossroads, and that our response would determine which path he took. If we all abandoned him, he'd spiral further. If we held him accountable while leaving the door open for change, he might actually walk through it." Her voice softened. John was right. He usually was about people. We talked until her energy flagged, then said goodbye with promises to visit soon. I hung up feeling grateful for grandparents who'd seen the long view, who'd understood that family isn't about unconditional acceptance but about conditional support tied to genuine effort. 6 months after that conversation, Grandma Helen passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 88, had lived a full life, and left behind 2 grandsons who'd learned from her wisdom about accountability, grace, and the possibility of change. Derek and I organized the funeral together. We divided tasks efficiently, checked in regularly about decisions, and supported our grieving parents without falling apart ourselves. Working together felt natural, comfortable, like we'd been doing it for years instead of gradually rebuilding over months. At the funeral, I spoke about Grandma's fierce love and fiercer standards. Derek talked about how she'd saved his life by refusing to enable his self-destruction while simultaneously offering him a path forward. Our parents cried. Cousins nodded in recognition. Aunt Marie said it was the most honest eulogy she'd ever heard. Afterward, as we were packing up Grandma's house, Derek found a letter she'd written to both of us. The envelope said to my grandsons in her distinctive handwriting. We sat on her bed, surrounded by boxes of belongings waiting to be sorted, and read it together. The letter talked about mistakes and redemption, about how every person deserves the chance to change but how that chance has to be earned through consistent effort. She wrote about watching us grow up, seeing our different strengths and struggles, hoping we'd eventually understand that we weren't in competition with each other. Life is long enough for many versions of yourself, she'd written. Derek, you spent years being someone destructive and lost. Nathan, you spent time being rightfully angry and protective. Those were chapters in your stories, not the whole book. What matters is what you write next, and whether you write it with integrity and compassion. We both cried, clutching that letter like the precious thing it was. The final wisdom from someone who'd loved us enough to tell us hard truths and believe in better versions of ourselves. She was right about everything, Derek said eventually. I hate that I wasted so many years before figuring that out. You figured it out when you were ready. That's all anyone can do. Are we okay? Really okay, not just functional? He looked at me with complete openness, no defensiveness or manipulation, just genuine question. Yeah, I said. We're really okay. And we were. Not perfect, not without occasional awkwardness, not completely free from the echoes of past pain. But okay in the way that matters, in the way that allows for moving forward together instead of apart. That's the final truth of this story. Revenge feels satisfying in the moment, but reconciliation feels better in the long run. Watching someone face consequences can be gratifying, but watching them grow from those consequences is transformative. Derek destroyed my graduation, but he didn't destroy me. And in failing to destroy me, he ultimately destroyed the worst parts of himself. That's a victory I never could have achieved by fighting back harder or hurting him more. Sometimes the best revenge is becoming someone who no longer needs it.